Can you see the slides there?
Yes, sir, we can see the slides.
Perfect.
Okay, so we'll be putting our PPT first, and then we will share the screen to you, and then you may put across yours.
Perfect. Like whatever your standard pedagogy is.
Yep, yep. So you may stop sharing presentation now, and we will just start
Okay.
us. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Uh, Nihali, can you please put on the PPT? Wonderful. Okay. So great, great. So warm welcome to all the participants to this wonderful Friday afternoon. I know it's been a busy week for the last week of the month, but it doesn't stop us from learning. And as we are succession planning and not just preserving. Succession planning is the process for identifying, developing new leaders to replace the old ones when they leave or they retire. Here, the planning is usually closed process, so that those who have been into the process are not likely to know about, they have been into the chat list or the window. What is the process of succession planning and what are the key steps to it? Let's hear it out from our speaker today. HR Association of India welcomes you all to the 2021 Dialogue Masterclass series on the topic Succession Planning and Executive Perspective. To know more about HRAI and its events, I would request all the participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. Request all the participants to kindly follow the webinar guideline mentioned in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We'll be running a poll before the Q&A session. Request all the participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take privilege to introduce our master for today, Dr. Nirav Mandir, Chief Human Capital Officer, Sri Ramakrishna Exports Private Limited. Dr. Nirav Mandir has been instrumental as Chief Human Capital Officer with Sri Ramakrishna Exports Private Limited (SRK), world largest diamond and jewelry manufacturing and export conglomerate. He shoulders the strategic responsibilities of SRK's global HR, IR, administration, HSE, CSR, and compliances. He is also the project administrator for SRK's state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities certified by the US Building Council. Dr. Nirav has achieved his postdoctoral fellowship from South Korea, a PhD from United States, Advanced HRM from IIMA, Masters in Philosophy, Postgraduate Diploma in Industrial Safety and Environmental Management, MSW LLB Special, and BSc Physics. He has published 6 HR, HSE related research papers in various national and international journals. He is also certified lead auditor for ISO standards, that is 9001, 45001, and 27001. A certified assessor for lean manufacturing, material flow costing accounting, psychometric assessment, value stream mapping, certified HR analytic and metrics professional, certified employee engagement professional, certified food safety professional, first aid senior, certified industrial and fire safety professional, certified leadership coach, innovation and strategy professional from Harvard University, USA, and a certified independent director, IICA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, DOI. He is recognized for his untiring work with prestigious award in his HR journey. Youngest HR Professional of the Year 2018 by National Institute of Personal Management, Top 100 HR Minds by India in 2018 by Times Accent, and Most Influential HR Leader in India 2016 by World HRD Congress. Do feel free to follow him on LinkedIn. Details for the same are shared in the chat window. Without taking much time, I now welcome Dr. Nirav Mandir to take this session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sham, for this generous introduction. And I'm truly privileged to be among this masterclass series. And it gives a burden on the speaker when you're saying that you are taking the masterclass. So I don't know what kind of master we are, but we are just HR practitioner who are practicing in the interest of the organization and in the interest of the HR community. Nothing more than that. And thank you once again for having me here and for a kind and august invitation for this session.
Yes.
Shall I share my screen now?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So slides are visible. I hope slides are visible there.
Yes, sir. Good.
Okay. So Uh, good afternoon to all of you, and I would like to have a steep observation over the timing of the masterclass series, and it gives again the huge weightage on the speaker's part because it's a post-lunch session. Generally, in the sessions and the in-person seminar, speakers refrain to take the post-lunch session. It's really hard to wake the respondents up after the delicious lunch. So this HR AI has put a responsibility on the speaker's shoulder, how to make the respondents awake with his words of wisdom. So I'll try my level best that you'll be having a kind of a nice session for next 30 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion upon. So just would like to share, when I was being requested for the session and I was being asked to choose the topic in the interest of the larger HR community, I was in a slight dilemma that what kind of topic I can offer. Generally, because since more than 2 years, we are continuously being overwhelmed with the series of webinars and the e-virtual sessions. And we heard a lot, being a HR practitioners, we heard a lot regarding various HR practices, various HR processes, and whether HR transformation things within the organization. We heard a lot about it, but I thought, let me slightly uh, think out of the box and how I can talk more about the business from being an HR practitioner. So I thought of to deliver the note on this session is succession planning and an executive perspective. So when I was like compiling my thoughts for this session, I was in kind of a illustrious thought that what can be the deliverables. So I just did the research. I wanted to share some experience also, like how we are doing the succession planning, especially at the executive level at SRK. But before that, I can pretty much relate this topic with one of the very insightful shloka from Rigveda, which simply says that amamantram aksharam nasti mulanoshadam अयोग्यहम पुरुषो नास्ति योजकस्त्रः दुर्लभ. I'll repeat this sloka again in the interest of the community who are not so well versed with the Sanskrit. Amamantram aksharam nasti mulanoshadam ayogyaham purusho nasti yojakastra durlabha. Which simply says, if I'll just translate into the English language, it simply says there is no word in this world which doesn't contain any mantra. There is no vegetable or there is no plant in this world which doesn't contain any medication value. I'm talking about the herbs and plants used for the medicated things. The third line, it says, Ayogyaham Purusho Nasti. There is no human being in this world which does not contain any kind of a value or any kind of a skill set. Then what is missing? The only thing is missing is Yojakastra Durlava. The right person, or right personnel rather, I would say, who can identify the right set of skills and that particular individual is missing. And that is the biggest challenge prevailing within the world as far as identifying the right talent is concerned. So I can say that, especially in the current times when the pandemic is like disrupted the entire organizations within the world, that is the core challenge which organizations are feeling: how to identify the right talent, and especially when we are talking about the executive level talent. And that's how we would like to bring this topic to all of you. But just to get into the exit topic, I would like to slightly touch upon the perspective. What can be the executive perspective? So, I would like to start with the definition of career. When we are talking about the career, so how we can define the career? What I understand from the career is nothing but an occupation when you are holding any position in any of the occupation which has had like change over continuous years. So how you are dealing with the various portfolios, how we are dealing with the various assignments, that is what I believe is career all about. And when we are talking about career, it is incomplete to talk about career management, career planning, and career development. So these are the core fundamentals of any person's life cycle within the corporate ladder or a professional gesture. So when we are talking about the career management, so what career management is all about? So when you are thriving for the progress within the requiring and acquiring the skill sets, when you are interested in your respective kind of portfolios or a kind of job specifications, that at that point somewhere back of the mind you are thriving for your right set of expectations molded into the respective portfolios. And that is all about how the organizations are continuously doing their best in terms of employees career development, career planning, and career management is concerned. So, in the interest of the time, and in the interest of the just to check the current level, how you all are feeling within your respective organization, I would like to run a poll, and I request Sham if we can shoot the first poll, and then we'll deliberate upon the various details upon that. So now, very simple question to all of you, and you can connect your respective organization by this question: how strong is your executive bench? When I'm talking that the organizations are prevailing, but if you talk about your top leads, the leadership level, the CXOs, how strong do you feel that your executive bench is? Because the ultimate discussion of the next 30 minutes will be relying on this sets and how we can plan our discussion in the further uh, kind of interest. So I don't know for how long you'll keep the poll up, but I think 1 minute is more than enough, and we can have the results soon after. So I'll encourage all of the participants to please do participate in the poll so that we can mold the discussion in the due course of time in the interest of the result of the poll. So I'll request, I think, almost okay. So when most of the guys are feeling that they are having the strong strength at the leadership level, and the performance of the leaders are really intact. So I think those who are feeling this kind of scenario, they are really at good place. And almost 38% of the guys are feeling that they are in a mixed kind of well said there, the current roles and jobs have enough potential for the higher level roles. For those, I think it's really good that nobody opted for the weak, and they are even subsequently the option of the emergency. So I think uh, result is good to go ahead, and the respondents of the group, I am big kudos to them that they are working with the right set of organization where the employers have derived the succession planning, especially at the executive bench, pretty much. So I think we'll close the poll, and I'll just quickly run through the slides. So when we are talking about the succession planning, mainly these three parameters can we can opt for, and especially the initial discussion is required to identify and understand all these three parameters. When we talk about the performance potential and readiness, so we all know what is performance and how we can derive the performance, and what are the measures to derive the performance within the organization, what are various methods to, and what is the pedagogy for that, what is the methodology for that. But here I would like to have my focus where the organization mostly gets confused to identify the right execution of potential and readiness. Generally what has been happened that the organization slightly manipulating both of the terminology. They generally think that the potential is almost equal to the readiness, but there is a huge difference in both of the terminology, and especially at the execution part when the organization is defining the entire the performance management system and doing the succession planning, especially for the executive level. There is a huge difference in that. Potential, we mean that when we are seeing the possibility of that particular skill set into any individual, and that we are aspiring that person to take the charge in the respective portfolio in the due course of time. But at the same time, and there are various methods you can, when you're doing your talent reviews, when you're doing your like 9 box assessment with your peers and your subordinates and your superiors. These are the kind of a potential mapping exercise which we generally all do within the respective organization. But it doesn't mean that it's all about readiness. It's having a different portfolio. Readiness, what I pursue, is all about when you are identifying the personnel with the existing skill set can be leveraged in the respective portfolio. It's not about the future part, it's about the current part. So there is a difference of two tenses in the potential and readiness, and that's how I was pointing more about the difference in between potential and readiness. So this is, we are talking about readiness when we are talking about the current set of skills which the person is already holding for the future roles. And that's where the role of a leadership, especially the HR consultants, comes into, when how to identify those personnel they can offer a role in the due course of time. And I'll quickly jump into the next slide, which I like really much. So when we are talking about the leadership pyramid, you might have seen this pyramid many times, but I would like to define this pyramid in a different perspective, in a different format. So when we are talking about when we see the pyramid starting from the top CXO level till the individual contributor, and rest at the bottom of the pyramid, we are having the business drivers. If we are going from bottom to top and we are targeting more on the individual contributor, we are more focusing on that who can lead the show. So there is a much difference where I'm saying who can lead the show. But the moment we are going to the upper ladder and becoming the frontline leader, it creates a broader perspective, and your focus gets shrunken, but your perspective gets broader. The more you learn on the mid level or the senior level, you are doing the comprehended kind of intervention to your strategy part, and defining the strategy, defining the scope, the policies, the kind of a core strategic environment you are getting into. Your focus gets more shrunken, and ultimately is the top. And I would, when we are talking about the CXO levels, I was going through the report published by Aon 21 in 21 recently, just last week, which says that the medium average salary of the CXO level in India is almost has dropped down to 3.63 crore per annum. And that's the ultimate goal as far as our leading the professional career within the organization is concerned. We all want to reach to that CXO level where we can have a lavish lifestyle, lavish salaries, and the perks and the benefits and the fringe benefits and whatnot. So if you're thinking about getting into the top of the ladder, but the road is not so smooth. And we'll come to the various slides, and we will be in comprising of that what are the various traits which one can overtake, and then one can opt while climbing the ladder on the top. The more we are going on the upper side, the risk factor, I've already drawn down the line that the risk factor is getting appraised. So the meaning is that if you are growing laterally within your organization, or within if you're quitting one organization and getting into another organization, but you are actually enhancing the risk of your career, and you are putting your career at the stake, the one single mistake at the top level may ruin your career. So along with the all the luxury benefits which one CXO level can desire for, but at the same time one is to also aware regarding the various risk factors attached to it, because there are no free lunches in this world. And the more we down at the bottom line, I think we are more opting for the volume. So uh, generally the numbers gets shrinken when you are going up and up, but it gets drastically enhanced when you are coming back to the bottom of the pyramid. So it's all about the risk versus volume game, one can say that. And as I have mentioned earlier, ultimately the difference is at the CXO level, when you are talking that who can actually run the show, but at the bottom level, when you are talking about being the business driver at the individual contributor level, who can lead the show. So there is a huge dilemma between who can lead the show and who can run the show. And that's what about the ability of a leader to how convert your capabilities and convert your potential by leading the things and by running the things in the foot of becoming a CEO or a CXO level personnel. So when we are talking about this mainly three parameters, I think there is some issue with the PowerPoint presentation, but we are talking about the performance part, the readiness part, and the potential. The second is potential, but I think the PPT is behaving nuts. So, but in the interest of the community, first is the performance, then second is the potential, and the third is the readiness part, which we are talking about. But ultimately, even if all three kind of terminologies are different, but they are getting merged at to a level where the organizations are thriving for the potential within the leadership. So ultimately the goal of the organization, especially the leadership part and especially at the top level, is how one can identify the right set of leaders who can replace the existing leaders in the due course of time. And by doing so, one can do the talent pool ready for the future prospects. So this is the ultimate objective of defining all three parameters and doing the entire course of exercise, starting from your job specification, description, analysis to the performance appraisal and the feedback part. When I'm talking about, and so this is the right example which I wanted to share with the all of you, that as of now we are talking about the individual athletes and we are talking about the decathletes. So how there is a steep difference in that. And now, as you all of are aware, the Olympic season is going on, and I could not refrain myself to share perspective, a famous quote and famous kind of a statement rather than a quote from a very scholar management guru named Thomas Friedman, and he has written in his book. The World is Played, the Workplace of the 21st Century. In that book, he has very wisely stated that the employees need to approach the workplace like an athletes in the Olympics. But there is one big difference in that. One is to prepare themselves by having the talk and by having the virtue of becoming continuously be trained, but they are not knowing which sport they are going to enter. Slightly complex. If I just summarize the statement, that what he is asking us to do is to prepare ourselves with a so diverse skill set, because we never know if we are jumping into the CXO level. So it will be requiring a kind of a very holistic view of the skills and diverse intellectual levels. So we can't be a athlete who is only opting for a single sport. Suppose you're for a sprinter or a runner or a swimmer, but he's asking us to be the decathletes, where you are having enough skill set, or even if you are not having that skill set, you are ready enough to acquire those skill set, because you never know in which kind of a portfolio you will jump into. And now even the organization are doing kind of a very diverse and a very unique transformation and change management practices, where you never know you are working in the operations department, and they might transfer you, enhance you in the different department which is not so familiar to you. So but the leadership level has to be so agile to transform themselves into any given environment, because now the world is really being disrupted, especially after pandemic, and it is the kind of a desire for any employer that where I am putting my employee in a respective department, one has to have that agility and that ability to adapt their respective environment by doing the learning and development interventions. Again, when we are talking about the CXO level, I'm no offense to the female community, but this is the kind of the scenario prevailing within India. It's research shared by DDI. When if you are seeing at the top level, 52% of the organization that did not nominate even female at the CEO candidate. And if you see the Indian companies, and it's not only about India, but the challenges there at the globe level, where we are not seeing much of the leadership being a female at the senior level. I'm talking about the CEO level, but the things are getting enhanced, and it's like the correction is being made within the organization policies. They are thriving for it, but still long way to go. And these are some of the barriers which are not making the organization so diverse, so that one can actually enjoy the true fruits of the performance within the organization. So diversity and inclusion is playing a very good role in their respective terminology. And especially when talking about the CEO level, most of the time what happens is, when your leadership, when the CXO level is not so prepared to take up that respective portfolio, but it has been given to them without the concern or without the pressure, or like with the pressure or with any given circumstances. But what happens is the suffering plays a major role at the top level, because they are at that position that they can't share their pain by not having the desired skill set or leadership traits or the qualities which the leadership has asked for, but ultimately sufferance gets there. So if we see about, I'll just slightly okay, so if you see that the kind of assigned a formal mentor, so these are the various ways where the organization can play a very vital role in providing the various intervention to those leadership if they are having any challenges taking up that respective portfolio. So one can sign a formal mentor and doing the coaching part, which is really, so again I would say that the most of the organization are having hiccup in understanding the difference between the mentoring and the coaching part. I won't go much into detail, but just in the interest of the respondents, there is a much difference in that, and one is to identify whether the leadership or the any person who is struggling with the respective challenges is required the mentor or a coach. And kind of they can also run a formal assessment and identifying the leadership strength and developing areas, and ultimately it's all about doing the competency mapping and the talent reviews for the leadership. And that's how the organization can run the intervention within the due course of time. I would also slightly would like to ponder upon that, due to the previous what I the details I have mentioned in the previous slide, what happens, there is no surprise the executive set up for failure, because if they are struggling, if they are having challenges in accepting the role, acquiring the desired skill set, so ultimately they would get failed. According to the Harvard Review 2020, most of the CEO level, like the kind of a CXO, but mainly the CEO level, gets changed almost at the average of 5 years, and that is really kind of demotivating, because they have assessed the Fortune 500 companies, and they did this survey that what is the average tenure of a CSO within the Fortune 500 companies, and with the surprise of all the data, it is only 5 years, and it's a Fortune 500 data. So I think that is the kind of a momentum we are looking at, that we really have to be really, it's really a critical decision to enhance and do the promotion to the respective leadership in the due course of time, when the person is really not ready to take up that particular role. So until and unless that person is not having ready, it's really a burden of proof to the that respective personnel to upgrade their portfolio and to make them higher into the leadership role. Again, I would like to talk about, there is a difference between the high potential and the successors. So there is a difference between a high potential and the successor part. When we are talking about the high potential, it is all about when you are opting for a right set of people. Again, when I said high potential is all about the thing which the personnel are more into the role agnostic. Target is a large number pool, especially the bottom of the pyramid, and how you can reach out to the broader capabilities, and you can see the long view, like seeing this sea from a horizon. So it's kind of a that kind of a trait which we are opting for. And especially at the successor part, it should be there at the role specific target name, and how one can do the replacement of the individual who left the organization or might have transferred to any other role, how one can be the successor in that particular place. And I would like to also ponder upon that, what is the success profile framework of that particular organization. And we have seen that there may be a 3 to 4 business driver which can lead the organization in the due culture and the due priorities. But when you're talking about customer focus, when I'm talking about customer, it's not only the external customer, it's also about the internal customer. So rather, in the larger interest, it is all about the stakeholders, and doing the cultivation process for all the stakeholders. So one is to identify who are our focused area, where to focus. And it's really good to know where we are before one gets to know that where we would like to go. So it's really good if you identify the current status and the current juncture of starting point, and then you can start the intervention. Otherwise, what happens is it goes in vain, because without identifying where exactly we are standing as far as our succession planning at the executive level is concerned, we won't be able to achieve the desired result in that particular thing. The second about the shift the organization paradigm, because when we are talking about the paradigm, no one has ever thought, if you ask me personally, that if someone would have asked me a question 2 years back, that being a diamond company, especially in the manufacturing sector, what's your say on the work from home or a hybrid workspace, my answer would have been really different. Because being a manufacturing, we don't really enjoy the privilege of like the work in the service sector. Especially, I think large chunk of responders are there from the IT background or the service sector. So we really don't enjoy that privilege to like work from home and having the flexibility to the hybrid workplace. But it was required at the time of pandemic. We are the first company in the gems and jewelry sector which started almost 3 months after the lockdown, when the entire world was there in the lockdown and the India was there in the lockdown. We, being a essential manufacturer, we started our business with the government guidelines, and like we had to do the reshuffling of the sitting arrangement for the entire facility, and it was a mammoth task for the organization. But that's how the capabilities of the leadership can be assessed, that how you are really thinking out of box, and if a given situation is really critical, then how you are taking up that situation, and how you are doing your planning. And especially at the executive level, it's really a critical task to do. And when you are entering into new markets, it's again a kind of a core challenge, because one is to understand the market. Based on the understanding of the market, one is to define the strategy, how I am going to do intervention in that particular, how I am getting or establishing my presence in that particular market. But just to share that, being an industry leader, SRK, we are like actually working as a torch barrier for the industry. I'm not doing the self appraisal of my company over here, but I'm just sharing that it is the fact that, and when you are leading as a, like, just to set the benchmark, and when you are working as a torch bearer for the industry, you ultimately comes up with the responsibility. The reason why I'm saying so, whatever we do ultimately becomes the benchmark for the industry. So we have to be so critical in our decision, we have to be so cautious in our decision that if we sometime if we do something that becomes the benchmark, then we don't really want to give a wrong or a false sign to the industry. So that's a responsibility we take being an industry leader. And so is the case in the senior leader, especially at the CEO level, when they are like doing the and running the show. And as I told you, like at the bottom line they are leading the show, but at the top line they are running the show at the senior level. It's really kind of critical for them to take any decision, because they even never know what can be the consequences of that particular thing. Before I'm just jumping into this slide, I would like to request Sham if we can run the second poll. If Sham can listen to me,
Sure,
or
sure.
anybody from the group, yeah, if they can uh, run the poll, the second poll. Okay. So now this poll is more focused about where do you struggle in identifying and developing high potential executives. I think that's where I would like to have your inputs, and I will urge the respondent to participate in the poll and share your result, so that I can slightly deviate my presentation into that particular note. Yeah, that's really good. uh, like 50% of the person are saying that the prioritizing it, and some of now defining it. Okay, I would like to have more views on that, and that's where we can um, dilute our thought and talk especially into the various mode, right? Anybody, like, I'm I hope that the respondents are still awake in the post-lunch session, and I would once again urge, because it's a limitation of the um, e-meeting or a kind of a webinar, that you can't do much of the engagement because you do have your limitation. But soon we'll be having the kind of a hologram world, which we can really do the physical gestures, and that can engage the respondents in a good form. Okay, almost equal. So what I'm pursuing from the, I think we can end the poll. So what I'm pursuing from the result of the poll, the majority of the respondents are feeling that they are struggling in identifying, developing the high potential executives, and they are not ready, or they are not being capable enough to prioritize this. And that's where the change management practices comes into the picture, and that's I'm talking about in this slide. And the 36% is also about defining, because they are not aware that how to define those challenges, especially within the high potential executives. And that's where it's bang on the slide. So when we are talking about, when someone said like they are more inclined toward the defining, they really less understand how to define those challenges, how to define those things. So first thing which we can say, that the making the business case for any executive level potential assessment. And if you are a HR leader, then it's more critical and more kind of illustrious for you to make a business case for my organization. If I share my story, I started my career with the Apollo hospitals, and then jumped into the James and Jewelry sector. And uh, it was perceived to be, in the past I'm talking about, a kind of a semi-organized sector. And people used to ask me, what blunder have you made in your life, and especially in your career, by opting for a semi-organized industry? And I was not having answer at that time, but I tried for that answer, because starting from a corporate world to change into the semi-organized sector, but I was having a faith in my capabilities, that if I'm going in a right direction, if I'm having the patience to make the change management practices part of the organization's culture, then I think there won't be any challenge. And I think we are requiring more leaders, and especially the HR personnel. They can really be the change driver for their organizations, because until and unless you are not putting a business case, and it's very rightly said in our HR gamut, that until unless you don't create value for you as an individual, as a department, as well as the change management driver to the organization, you are not going to get due weightage within. And now we are talking about HR as a business partner. Until unless we are not doing this exercise in a right manner, and by identifying the right set of parameters, and prepare a business, can submit it to the leadership in the due format, with a due kind of a convincing power, then and then you can have the executive potential, and you can have your importance of the succession planning within the organization. For those who have opted for the they really don't know, so this is the golden advice for them. The second part is the balancing the replacement. Generally, leadership is always in a myth that we are already having the set of leaders there within the given portfolio, but they really don't know whether they are going to remain or not. And that's the critical question one should ask to the leadership. If they are not ready to do the succession planning at the executive level, one has to make them understand that. And it's all about the psychological contract, rather, I would say. When I'm talking about psychological contract, there was a time in the past, if I talk about the 2 3 decades back, then organization, the psychological contract between the employee and the employer was that the employer will say that I'll take care of you, don't worry, you just do your best. And that was the psychological contract, and even the employees were fine with that. But if we see about the psychological contract between employer and employee as of now, that the organizations are still saying that I'll take care of you, do your best. But now the employees are also aware that they can do and they can take care of themselves. Organization don't need to worry much on that part. But at the same time, what they are thriving for, what they are having in their mind is how you can make me grow by having the continuous intervention of learning and development, and prepare me for the day I must quit. And and for what? For having the balance in my professional and personal life. So the employees are really, the state of the mind of the employees have changed. Organization were taking care about the employees, they are still taking care about the employees, but the set of mind has changed. Especially I'm talking about the Gen Z coming into the organization, the mindset have changed. So the intervention, the balancing between the replacement, especially the successor and predecessor part, it is become the critical thing. And ultimately, how one can cultivating a growth culture among the executives. I would really quote one book, and it's in the interest of the HR community. I do recommend that one must read that book. It's about the Fons Trampenars, riding on the waves of culture. What he has very wisely mentioned in this book is that how you can expect and derive the performance from your employees, especially at the CXO level. So he has very narrated very good equation and very wise equation, that the performance of the individual, there are two types of organizations. One organization is having that they are paying the salaries starting from top to bottom, along with the incentives, perks, and everything whatnot, and they are asking the employees to work with the help of machine. Now we are talking about AI, machine learning, technologies, and all, and they are expecting the result out of it, the performance part. There are second side type or second set of organizations where they are thinking that the amount or the kind of a percentile of the performance is in combination, or one can say the correlation with the social thread between the employer and the employees. So the performance, in a simple word, is completely in correlation of the social thread between employee and employer. So that's where the how one can have the growth culture, and how one can have the culture where the growth is ultimate within the organization, but at the same time sustainability has to be bought within the organization. And ultimately it's all about, it's a risk game, as I mentioned earlier while running through the slide of pyramid, and how you can engage your executive by having various intervention to the organization. uh, a kind of a in-house story from SRK when we ran that succession planning for the entire executive. Like, first one is to prepare the CEO, that we are in deep thrust to do the succession planning, and especially the top leadership. And for that we also required the help of the coaching and did the assessment for the high potential successor. And it was like somehow we got the solution, and we also did the role swapping thing, kind of a thing, when the finance personnel jumped into the operations and like whatnot. And we also did the lateral moves within the organization and within the vertical also. And that's how we allowed the leaders to engage more into the area where they were the black spot, they are not really good at, but we allowed them to build their capabilities in the our organization, where they can actually do the development. Because it's the organization is expecting, especially at the CXO level, they are expecting a one jack for all. So that's how we did the respective intervention. And we also did some engagement with the change management exercise, the redefining, and we introduced the transformation process and doing the change management practices. And especially in the pandemic times, we done a lot of change within the organization as far as strategy and the kind of a mindset of the leadership is concerned. And these are the kind of how we can ready the pool of the executives by doing the coaching and the development experiences, and with various parameters. And that's how like one of the example, while we did the intervention, like how a CEO can be mapped in the various parameters. And we did the talent review process for the top leadership. The IIM Ahmedabad was a knowledge partner in that, and we also did the 360-degree feedback assessment for all the leadership, where we can really identify the right set of skills among the leadership. And that's these are the parameters on which we have catered. And also did the personality assessment, how we can develop the critical thinking within the leadership. And one can do, how one can work in the teams, one can work in the interest of the organization, in the interest of the personal growth, because both thing goes hand in hand. And that's how like some of the uh, intervention, as I mentioned, 360-degree assessment, interview assessment, and business simulation exercise. And when we are talking about the high potential executives, these are the things where I already discussed: the pressure point development, the executive focus coaching, and the group development part. And these are the kind of coaching exercise what one can opt for within their organization, by having like identifying the challenge, and then approach and then fix the challenges in the due form. And actions to consider some of the identified and development points, and wants to really be keen that being an, and that's how I pondered upon the difference between the athletes and decathletes. So it's not always good. If you really want to go fast, then you can run alone. But if you really want to go long within the organization, that you have to work in the team, and in the team of executives really hard to work. And that's all about my take in that. And especially when the HR is defining the performance management practice, especially the appraisal part within the organization, I would urge the HR practitioners just not to link the appraisal process only with the performance part. It has to be have a ideal linkage to the job specification part, and even the potential part of the appraisal can take place. The organization, most of the organization, getting rid of the bell curve processes, but I think one can have that kind of intervention, and I hope you'll definitely get result. If you are not focusing only on the performance part, the potential part is also making a vibe in the organization. And that's my take in this particular session. I hope I am not taken much time, and I would hand over the stage to Sham. Thank you very much for listening to me very peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neerav. Before we move ahead into Q&A sessions, we will be initiating a poll to request all the participants to kindly share your feedback. While you're doing so, if in case you have any, we have received a lot of queries about the certificates offered by HRAI. You can claim your certificates by sharing your details, name, and session attended in an email to the email address provided in the chat window. Please ensure you do this by 31st of July 2021. We will be emailing you certificates based on the details received. Okay. So, Dr. Nito, we have received a couple of questions during our registrations. Would you like to take them now? So, we
Yeah,
are on
please
day
go
four,
ahead.
so we'll
Yeah,
take just
let's
one
go to
question and
word.
then
In the interest of the time, I think we'll be having it like two, three questions, and then we'll close down.
sure, sure. Great, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what strategies we should incorporate to make it really a right one? How do we test our strategy before executing it?
So, can you just repeat the question? Your voice was breaking. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was.
So,
Yeah.
what strategies we should incorporate to make it a really right one? How do we test our strategy before executing it?
So when you're talking about the strategy, I am like, unfortunately, there is no one solution of identifying the right strategy for the organization. The strategies are always can be defined on the crux of the culture of the organization. We heard a lot about strategy eats culture, the breakfast, or kind of a what not about that particular thing. But what I am recommending to the leaders, who are especially the person who has asked for that particular question, that first assess the culture of the organization where you are working, and then you can, based on the culture, you can define the strategies, right? The strategy of the James and Jewelry Company cannot be applicable to any like the steel manufacturing plant or a kind of a pharma manufacturing plant, because the mindset of the people, the kind of intervention of that particular thing is really different, and it's like completely 180-degree shift. So I would recommend that there is no one solution to it, and one is to equally keep this thing in mind, that the solutions of yesterday cannot be applicable for the today's challenge. And Albert Einstein quoted very wisely in their quote that you cannot solve the same problem from where it got evolved. So you have to really be thinking out of the box to define the strategy for your organization by assessing the culture of the organization. And it's not the job, because generally the leadership is, and it's a myth again, that the leadership believe that the defining the strategy is the role of HR. But I would argue on that, because it's not the only role of HR. Ultimately, defining the strategy, it's a collaborative and a kind of a very holistic exercise which cannot be completed without the inputs from the leadership, the top leadership. When you talk about the marketing, finance, production, operation, you name any vertical, all have to have taken into consideration, and their inputs can be registered, and then the organization can come up with a kind of ideal strategy which is there in the coherence of that particular culture of the organization. That's my, I think I tried my best to satisfy the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. There's one more question. While doing succession planning, what all hidden factors one should consider to ensure there is no influence of bias elements?
So there is a different topic where I can take another session for an hour, how to reduce the biasness within the organization. And when we talk about the biasness, we could talk about the nepotism. When there are many kind of a synonyms of that, it's really hard. Ideally, there should not be any biasness while defining the strategy or a culture of the organization. But generally, it's being seen that it happens. And so, rather than saying that we can avoid the biasness or a prejudice or a nepotism at the workplace in 100%, we should try that how we can minimize those things. Because ideally it should be there, but practically it's not completely possible. But to the extent that when even I just was going through one of the research by the Yale University, that the developer who is actually doing the coding, and the reason why I'm quoting the IT, because the more and more personnel are there from the IT background, the coder who is actually doing the coding and doing the software development even can be biased while doing the coding. So you never know, if you are relying on a ERP software which gives you the insight and doing the HR analytics for to give you the right set of data to identify the right pulse of the organization, and while doing the pulse survey, but you never know that what kind of bias that particular organization or the developer might be having, or while communicating the requirement to the software developer, any HR or any other ERP who has become the carrier to develop that ERP might be carrying that bias. Who never knows? So rather than saying that we should be eradicating the bias of 100%, how we can minimize the bias. And while minimizing the bias, we need to really understand, and I kindly go through my LinkedIn profile. I've written an article on that. I won't be in the interest of time, I won't go into detail, but I've written an article that how one can reduce the bias, especially the unconscious bias, which we are really even don't know that we are biased. So you can go through that article and you'll get to know more about how we can reduce the unconscious bias within the organizations.
Wonderful, wonderful. And there's one more
By
question.
the way, I'm not doing my doing the kind of I'm not being the brand ambassador of myself by quoting that I've written article, but in the interest of time, I'm just saying that please go through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And okay, this one question from Jarita Biswas. Could you please mention the name of the book here on the chat window? Okay, so the books that you mentioned, sir, if you can just give the
The
name.
first book I mentioned, written by Thomas Friedman, the book name is The World is Flat, The Brief History of 21st Century. That's the first book I quoted. The second book I quoted, the author is Fons Trampanars, and the name of the book is Riding on the Waves of Culture. Two books I quoted.
Okay, wonderful. Jarita, I hope you have taken the notes now. And with this, I see that we don't have any further questions. Okay,
So I'm
so
really optimistic. If you're not having any question, then the respondents were very wise enough to understand the entire context. I'm taking it on affirmative note.
sure, true, sir. And yeah, and there were a lot of chats that we would love to have another session on, the biasness part. So we will always want you to come back to us with the biased topic.
Yeah,
Okay,
but that, just if you touch upon that, that article is there on the People Matters, and you can quote for my name, and then you can get that article in that on
sure,
the unconscious bias.
sure,
Just
sure.
in the interest of any question.
Okay, okay, thank you. Well, an empowered session full of learning and wonderful stories. Thank you, Dr. Nirav, for taking us through this beautiful session. Beautiful quotes shared with examples which had a lot of takeovers. Thank you for sharing this success profile framework with us, along with your research work and books recommended by you. It has been a pleasure being with you today. I'm sure our participants had a lot to learn and take away from this session. So before we conclude with our today's session, we would also want to thank all of our association members, Asia, NASCOM CFP, Indian Local, Tel Group, TLE, Wiki, and ClipTalk for supporting these HRAI events. To know more about to know more about this association, request you to kindly visit the links provided in the chat window. Thank you once again, our dear speaker and participants, for joining us today. Do join us for our next session on Connecting the Dots series on the topic Tech HR, People, Processes, Policies on the 5th of August 2021. Request you to kindly register for this event and on the link mentioned in the chat window. That's it from us today. Thank you. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care and bye for now.
Thank you very much, Sham, and thanks for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nihari. We may conclude with this session.